You are listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about the latest reads, views, and passions, alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Danielle Margarita from the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. My pronouns are she, her. Let's dive in and discover who our guests are today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eden Royce. I am a writer of mostly Southern Gothic fiction for adults and for young readers. And I am delighted to be here and talk about my loves, my passions, one of which is obviously books.
A little bit later in the show, we'll talk to Eden about writing, reading, and Southern Gothic. But before we get to that, let's start out like we always do with what have you been reading?
Oh gosh, I have been reading several things that unfortunately I can't discuss right now because I've been given a couple of books to write blurbs for, but the books haven't come out yet. So look for some books with some blurbs on them from me at some point, the end of the year or early next year. When I read a lot of other work for blurbs and such, I always afterwards try and go back to a book that I've read before that I always love. So right now I'm reading a book called The Conjuring Dies by Rudolph Fisher. It was written, I believe, in the early 1930s, and it is considered to be the first mystery with an all-black cast written by a black author. And it is just a fantastic time. It is a great mystery setup. There are fascinating characters and a plot that is really engrossing. So I'm spending some time with that, just reliving it, delving back in before I read something that I haven't read before again.
How exciting to be writing blurbs for unpublished titles yet. Do you feel like you have a big secret to keep every time you get sent a book to blurb?
It does feel like a big secret. It's also a huge honor to be asked to blurb someone's book because I just always feel like someone wants to know what I think about this book. Oh my gosh. So I really take it seriously, not only because it's somebody's work that I'm saying things about, but also I know what it's like to work so hard on a book, put so much of your time, energy, blood, sweat, tears, all that into a book and just be holding your breath, wondering what someone's going to say about it. So it does feel like an honor, but it also is a huge secret that I'm more than willing to keep until it actually comes out and it can go in the reader's hands.
That's really fun, being able to talk nice about your fellow writers and your colleagues in that kind of way. I've been having a hard time getting into like finishing a book lately. I don't know what it is, but I did just read Monica Kim's new book, Mocha. Familiar with that one?
Ooh, I'm not familiar with Mocha. I'm familiar with Monica Kim. What's Mocha
So
about?
Mocha is like a Korean portmanteau of like a spy cam. And so it's set in Korea, and the main character, Da Ye, is a young woman working in an office setting. She has a new beau. She's deeply in love with him, but she also has a traumatic past. Her older sister had died very tragically in a drowning, and so there's a lot of grief around that, a lot of guilt. So the older sister was sort of the golden child. So her sister died. Um, and the story goes back and forth between her experiences and then like a coworker who works in IT, who has been setting up these spy cams all through the office. And so it's a bit of a ghost story with the sister, her presence still lingering, but then also it's a real, I guess the spy cams are a real big problem in Korea right now. And so it's definitely like a criticism of sort of society and misogyny and sort of current events, and it was very well done. Though like a lot of ghost stories, it left me really like sad at the end. Sometimes ghost stories, I'm just like, oh, I just feel so bad for the ghost. And my My husband will always say, like, "You're supposed to be scared of the ghost." And I'm like, they're sad and lonely."
No, I feel bad for ghosts too. You're not alone.
Oh, good, great. Do you like watching, like, spooky movies or spooky shows? Like, your writing is definitely very spooky. So do you see that thread through, like, other media that that you enjoy?
I love spooky shows, spooky movies, spooky TV shows, combinations of like horror and sci-fi, horror and romance, horror and insert thing here. So I love a little spookiness, a little creepiness, and it's just right now there's so many things to get into depending on your level of love for it. There's really intense shows that have a lot of, I don't always want to say gore, but a lot of creepy, weird imagery. But then there's also lots of great psychological horror that's coming out and that is out, and for all age groups as well. I see stuff for much younger kids. You know, I grew up on a lot of spooky stuff. My house was definitely one of those we watched Hammer horror movies on the weekends kind of thing. But I also kind of grew up in the era of Scooby Doo mystery TV shows as a kid. So I always love that combination of there's clearly something happening here. What is it that's going on? But also when it goes fully deeply into you're never going to understand it. Just, you know, try to survive it, try to make it out the other side. I absolutely adore it.
So is there anything that you've been excited about that you've been watching recently, spooky or otherwise?
I'm always watching something spooky. You should see my watch list in like Disney Channel and all the streaming services. There's always this huge watch list of films. One thing I watched recently because it's a classic horror movie that I'd never seen before. I watched it over the weekend. I watched Cemetery Man. I think the original Italian movie name is Della Morte Della More or something like that. But it was one of those, I think, either 1980s, maybe early 90s films where just sort of anything goes. And I love that. And it's just this guy, played by Rupert Everett, is the caretaker at a cemetery, and sort of once a week, he has to really watch out for the people that are buried there because they come back to life, and he has to dispatch them again. And then, you know, some questionable decision making happens, you know, because we have to have a plot arc for the movie. There's always some questionable decision making. And I found myself watching it going, what is happening? But it really was engrossing, and I stayed with it the whole time. I also love watching, I live in the UK, so there's tons of British produced murder mystery TV shows. So I adore those. There's a puzzle based one called Ludwig, which combines the solving of the crime with just sort of the puzzle of the episode. So, you know, maybe it's a logic puzzle, or maybe it's some sort of spatial awareness puzzle kind of thing. And putting the two of them together, I think it's a great idea. And I think there's some other shows that have also done it, but this one has sort of captured my attention. It's in my watch list right now. As far as getting back to sort of creepy things, um, I have I have several things on my watch list that I haven't gotten to yet. One of which is Send Help, and it's one of those films where an office worker who's been really bullied by their boss. They're on a flight and the plane goes down, and they've crashed on this island. So basically, she's like, "Well, you're not my boss anymore." So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that and how that turns out. Um, yeah, so that's probably the ones that are sort of top of mind. I also found that one of the things that I really enjoy doing, sort of from a rewatch perspective, is going back to the original X Files and watching those. I absolutely adore those. So that's in the list as well, because sometimes I just want a little bit of that too, creepy and conspiracy theory and all that other good stuff.
Oh my gosh, I love the X-Files. I think the X-Files are what got me into spooky things. I mean, Fox Spooky Mulder. I mean, amazing. What do you think about the reboot? I'm so excited about the reboot.
I'm looking forward to it, but I'm always on the fence about reboots, especially if I've loved the original. So I'm willing and I'm interested to see what's going to happen, but so I'm reserving judgment until I get a chance to actually see it. But there's just something about David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson in that original that I think is it's great TV. And I don't know if you've ever seen some of the photos and the press shots that they did for X Files, just how sort of kooky and spooky they are, and I absolutely love them. They're great.
Right? They nailed the casting on that. Their chemistry is
Absolutely.
incredible. I'm excited about the casting for the reboot. That's what has me feeling like, okay, okay, I could get on this. I was a little doubtful, but I think the casting is so far is looking to shape up really well. So yeah, I'm really intrigued because I feel like they cast like also like a lot of weirdos, like actors who are known for being like weirdos and do a lot of weirdo roles. So I'm like, okay, this
I love weirdo roles for weirdo actors that embrace that that's why they're cast for things. I think that is absolutely fantastic.
I love that. Weirdo roles for weirdo actors. I'm gonna borrow that. That's gonna
Hashtag that, yes.
be my new descriptor. That's such a good way of putting it.
You have a
Um,
favorite weirdo actor?
do I have a favorite weirdo actor? Um, I don't know that she's like necessarily like you'd call her a weirdo, but I always know like, right, if Parker Posey's gonna show up in something, it's gonna
Hmm.
be a little over the top and weird. She'll make it a little weird. So I like when she shows stuff a lot of times. And also, I've been rewatching, talking about rewatching shows. It's so weird. I'll go from X-Files to like Parks and Rec, and I've been rewatching Parks and
Yes,
Rec, and I mean that show has a lot of weirdo guest stars with
absolutely.
Jason Mantzoukas. I feel like they're like, oh, this scene needs like a little bit of chaos, and he's just the most chaotic
Yes,
out of all of
brings the
them.
chaos. Brings the chaos, definitely.
How about you? Do you have anyone where you're like, oh, this is going to be wild when they show up?
I I think when I see Crispin Glover is going to be in something, I'm like, okay, we're probably going to be in for a ride here. I think Willem Dafoe takes some roles where I go, you know what? I'm here for it. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I am along for the ride.
Yeah, they're great. They just really throw themselves into roles, which is so fun.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a, I think we're re-embracing weird plots now. You know, back in the 80s, you get in your time machine. You would watch these 80s movies and you would just never know what was going to happen. There were movies where someone would have a car in a plane and they would drive the car out of the plane and somehow like parachute it back to earth, while having a gunfight or something. I mean, it was just always over the top. And I think we got through the years really mired in, is this realistic? Is this realism? Would this happen in real life? And I just go, we all have probably had a serious dose of real life lately. Let's bring back the offbeat and the weird and the strange and the whimsy and all of that great stuff. So let's have all that back. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I thought we could talk a little bit about your work, starting off with Conjure Island, which is this year's Kids Reading Across Rhode Island selection. The K-Rary Committee was so excited to share your book this year with teachers and librarians. And so we had a K-Rary kickoff event on Saturday. And so we had copies of Conjure Island with
Oh,
the book
yay.
plates that you so graciously provided. And so it was fun to see kids getting excited to get their hands on it. Um, can you talk a little bit about Conjure Island?
Absolutely. Conjure Island is my second novel. It is written for middle grade students, mostly 8 to 12s, but there's some wiggle room in between there. And I think it's a perfect summer read because the idea for the book, which is a young girl who is from the Northeast, but is in a military family who's moved around a great deal and doesn't feel like she's really put down roots anywhere, through a series of circumstances with her family, has to go and visit her great grandmother in the American South, who she's never met before, and stay the summer with her. And I saw online someone saying that years ago, kids from other parts of the United States would go to visit their grandparents and other family members in the South over the summer. So they would have a taste of what it was like to live in a different part of the country, to see where their roots were, and to get that sort of connection to family. And fewer people, according to this article that I saw, were doing that. So a lot of times people have this incorrect assumption of what the American South is like and what the people are there are like. But I wanted to write a book that showed a young girl through no fault of her own having to be put in this situation where she's now immersed in this culture that she's a part of. It's her history, but that she doesn't know anything about. And she comes with her preconceived notions about what it's going to be like. And she doesn't want to be there. And through friendship, meeting people, learning magic, she starts to realize that she does have roots there. And there is a way that she can access belonging someplace, even though it's a place that she never knew of before she set foot on it. So I remember my cousins visiting for the summer when I lived in Charleston, and realizing that not a lot of kids are getting that opportunity anymore. I thought, okay, I have to write about this. So I wanted to pick a girl who thought she didn't have any roots or have any connections and desperately wanted them, but wasn't really sure that she wanted these roots. But through actually learning about them and learning what the people in the place is really like, and accessing a magic that she didn't know she had the ability to tap into, she realizes there's a whole world out here that I can be a part of and I can be involved in and make connections that will last me a lifetime.
And in Conjure Island, and I think too, like in your other novels and short stories, like I think you can feel like this deep love that you have for the South, which we definitely as the community we really loved in Conjure Island. That the setting is so rich, and especially for our kids here in Rhode Island, who I mean. This might be their first experience with what it can feel like in the South. And I'm just wondering, so you're a writer of Southern Gothic fiction. And I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about how you would describe Southern Gothic and what that means to you?
To me, Southern Gothic has an incredibly simple definition. It is writing about the lives of Southern people. And that can include magic, that can include ghosts, that can include recipes, that can include horror, fantasy, drama, all of those things, because it is just about the way that people live and have lived. So, chronicling that and writing about things like ancestry or ghosts or all of that sort of stuff, it's really a way that Southerners talk and communicate. Um, and that sort of magicality and connection really lives side by side with people in the American South. And you talk about your ancestors and you talk about ghosts, and, you know, it's a very normal sort of thing. And I remember doing an interview once where people were asking me about the journey as a Southern writer to publication. And it was to a group of Southerners. And I said, well, if you decide that you want to do traditional publishing, if you go and you get an agent, more than likely the agent that you have is someone who has never been to the part of the world that you are writing about. And you have to be prepared for certain questions is this, would this character really respond this way? Would they really act this way? And you really have to be secure in your portrayals to go, I realize this might be outside of the norm for someone who's not from this area, but this is absolutely the way that my character would respond. And knowing that going in is something that I always want to encourage people who are from places outside of where, the traditional hubs of uh, traditional publishing are. You really have to say, I understand that this might be different for you, or it might seem like an unusual response, but I promise this is really the way that someone from this part of the world would see it. So I really feel like one of the important things is being able to portray a part of the world to someone who's never been there so that it feels rich, it feels immersive, it feels like someone can go, oh, I totally understand. I get what that heat might feel like. I get what it might be like for this main character to finally get like a frozen icy drink after standing outside for a long time listening to a speech. That might be like the most amazing feeling. And one of the things I really remember when I was young growing up, where they would teach you things to watch out for uh, and be careful of when you're out and about, one of them was quicksand. And people joke about it now, going, I had to learn about quicksand and how to get out of quicksand, and that's never been a problem in my life. And there are places in South Carolina where you have to be careful about that. So I really wanted to have my character sort of get stuck in some of these situations that someone who's from the area would know to avoid, just to be able to get her into shenanigans that she has to get help to get out of, because she thinks she already knows everything, and she realizes that she's out of her element. It's a fish out of water story as well, and she has to start learning to rely on some of the people who are more knowledgeable, who are willing to help her if she'll only just accept it.
What got you started in writing Southern Gothic? Or did you maybe start writing maybe in another genre and kind of moved away from it?
I've always loved reading, so I knew at some point in my life I would want to write as well. And I wrote a lot of different things. I wrote poetry, I wrote scary stories, I wrote romantic stories, I wrote a ton of things, but I realized that the majority of them had some sort of connection to the South. My character was from there, or maybe it was set in the South. There was always this sort of undertone, even if it wasn't always blatantly mentioned. I was always thinking about it in that context. So I think that was just a progression for me to be able to say, yes, I'm absolutely going to stamp this work with this genre because I'm thinking of it that way. I'm not necessarily touting that every time, but then I thought, well, why not? This is a story about the lives of southern characters. So that's really what I'm trying to show on the page. So I think I just one day went, this absolutely fits these online definitions of what Southern Gothic is. And I realized that it's distilled down just you're writing about the lives of Southern people, regardless of whether they're in the South or whether they're carrying the South with them wherever they go. That's essentially what I always try to portray on the page.
Yeah, and I think Conjure Island really opened my eyes that Southern Gothic is pretty broad because I always understood it to be like, okay, great, it's going to be a spooky story in the South. But Conjure Island has a lot of the fantastical, there's a lot of, the magical realism and the history and the family roots. And so I really appreciate, learning more about how expansive Southern Gothic can be and how many stories that there's not just one story to say, like, okay, this is it, this is what Southern Gothic has to be, but it can be a lot of things. I think Contra Island does a really good job of showing that to both, kids and grown-ups alike. Um, Also, in reading more of your work too, I'm really impressed that you're writing for both, children, YA, adults. We can move through, through your body of work almost in a seamless way. You have such a clear style that's present in your work for all ages. The character building, the way you sort of unveil the setting, it's not all at once. It's kind of the setting, it's kind of mysterious. And you have such a great attention to detail, no matter the audience. How do you balance writing for different age groups while sort of keeping, what I'm noticing? I'm like, "Oh, this is that Eden touch, like, this is her style of writing," but it feels appropriate for the various age groups, and I imagine that's kind of tricky.
Writing for different age groups, I think you do have to look at your choice of language. And I started writing for adults as far as when I was looking to publish. When I was a kid, obviously there were writing assignments in school and all the other sort of things. But when I started writing to publish, I started writing for adults. And it really was because I felt like I had stories that I had to sort of get out of my brain or get off my chest. And I wanted to maybe rewrite a day that I had. I had a terrible day. I come home at night. I'm over it completely. And I just go, you know what? I'm just going to write something that reimagines this day as something better, something different. And I know people do that maybe from a journaling point of view or whatever have you, but it got to the point where I said, this is incredibly cathartic to be able to write these stories. And I realized that I'm one of those people that grew up in Charleston in a family where there were lots of folk tales and there were lots of stories that I got to experience and I got to hear from my family members and friends of family. And I realized that other people didn't have that. They didn't have a chance to get those stories from, a real storyteller in a family. And I wanted to sort of be that for someone else, be a storyteller for other people who may not be familiar with the folk tales of our people. Because a lot of Black people have thought that we don't have mythology, we don't have folklore, which isn't true. And it's just something that they aren't aware of or haven't been educated in. So I thought, you know what? This is my goal. This is what I want to do. I want to be that storyteller for other people. And when I wrote what eventually became Root Magic, I didn't write it with a kid audience in mind originally. And when I was going through edits, someone said, my first question to you is, do you want this to be a book for adults or do you want this to be a book for kids? And I thought about it and I said, I have short stories and things out there for adults. And I'm writing about ancestry. I'm writing about being able to accept yourself. I'm writing about ancestral magic and folklore as a deeply human thing and important to our culture. And I think younger kids need to see that earlier. So I went back and said, I want it to be a book for kids. And they said, great, here are my suggestions. And it was writing with more specific clarity, not using a lot of literary devices that kids may not be as familiar with. They can understand some things, but they usually don't have the depth and breadth of references that we do when we get a little bit older. So when I would use metaphor and all of that, it would be something that a kid could understand. When you say something like the heat was closing in on you like an aunt I didn't want to hug, that's something that, a kid can sort of get an understanding of what that's like. So just making sure that all the references, all the struggles, all of the whole plot arc and decisions that the characters had to make would be something that kids could grasp and go, oh, I see why this is such a tough decision. And things like bits of history that may or may not be in their curriculum. Things that I also wanted to put in things that might help parents or help responsible adults because it can sometimes be difficult to broach a subject that you want to talk to your kid about. How do you talk to your kid about bullying? How do you talk to your kid about someone dismissing their ideas or, someone telling them that they're ugly or dumb or, how do you even approach that subject? So I think having a book like Conjure Island, having a book like Root Magic or like The Creeping of Dogwood House, it's also a jumping off point for adults to be able to talk to kids about difficult subjects. And I think adults sometimes need a little bit of help doing that too, and a little bit of a push. So you can say, hey, let's read this book together, or hey, why don't you read this book and maybe we can talk about it? What was something hard that the character had to do? Have you ever had to experience something like that? What do you think you should do? I want you to know this is something you can talk to me about. So, trying to keep all of that in mind, that when you're writing for kids, you're also writing for adults as well, because adults are the ones that are going to make that decision. Is this a book that my kid is going to want to read? Is this a book I want to put in my library? Is this a book I want to put on the reading list for the summer? So you have to make the book good for adults, but you also have to make the book good for kids as well. And when you're writing for adults, you can just go, I get to use bad words. Yay.
Oh, I love that distinction. Um, in writing with both, for young people and adults, um, there's a common thread that I've noticed about home. You talked a little bit about Dell and Conjure Island, about, home is kind of transitory for her, with a military parent. Your newest children's book or middle grade book, The Creeping of Dogwood House, has Roddy, the main character, moving into a family home, his aunt and uncle. I mean, the title tells it all right there, The Creeping of Dogwood House. Um, and then your novella, Hollow Tongue, I mean, you write, "A house is the worst kind of monster." And that sentence, I sat with that sentence for a while thinking about that. Um, can you talk a little bit sort of about home being, sort of having maybe this sense of dread, or, this wariness about home, or maybe there's, home as horror, is, we see that in so many books and movies. How are you seeing that, and how is that showing up as a thread maybe in your work?
I I love a haunted house story slash film. And one of the reasons I love it is when you look at horror as a big broad genre, there are a lot of people that are afraid of it. They're hesitant. They just go, "Oh, I'm not a horror lover. I really That's too much for me." To the point where a lot of people will not brand their book as horror. They'll brand it as thriller or Gothic, so that they can sort of get around that stigma that the word horror has. But usually, that subgenre of horror, the haunted house story, most people are usually willing to give a haunted house story a chance. They don't want, to read about or watch some madman chasing you through the woods like with a machete or anything. But something about a haunted house is so beguiling and so intriguing to a lot of readers and viewers, because the sense of home for most of us means safety. It may or may not be the home we grew up in. Maybe it's the home that we have now, or maybe it's the home that we're planning to have. But there's this idea that home is a safe place. This is where I get to be me. I get to shut out everything else for even if it's a short time. And having that threatened in any way, that safety, that's something that really tugs at the core of us as humans. Oh my gosh, this is supposed to be an impenetrable place. This is where, I get to build myself back up after having been out in the world and experiencing that potential negativity, getting torn down, getting picked apart, and challenging something that's supposedly a safe place, is one of those things where you can come at it from, there's a ghost here, or there's another person here that's looking to get in, or, injure you in some way. Or in the case of Hollow Tongue, it's the house being the worst kind of monster because even if it isn't actively doing something, it is staying the exact same way that it was when it wasn't a safe place. It hasn't changed. So even though you've gone away and you think that you're stronger and you think that you're better, you've come back to this house and it is exactly the same. It's the same way it was when all of those things happened. And you realize, sometimes that strength is a little bit thinner than you originally thought. So I think having a house and having a home at the center of a lot of my work is making sure that we realize that we should be our own safe place and work on that first, being our own safe place for whatever else is out there.
Oh, I love that. I love thinking of ourselves as I'm gonna that's that feels like a really good way to like sort of think about, anxiety, fear, and being able to believe that and to remind yourself of that when, sort of the outside, everything else feels scary and unstable. That's such a beautiful way to
Mm.
put it. Have you ever encountered a haunted house or a haunted space or something that felt like the energy, the juju was just, like, not right?
Oh, all the time. I'm from Charleston. There's stuff everywhere. I have been to places where, I open the door and I'm like, nope, absolutely not. Nope. I have been in graveyards where I've felt comfortable, and I've been in homes where I have not felt comfortable. I've been on ghost tours and graveyard tours. I've been in converted plantation homes. I've been in all sorts of places that have had vibes, if you'd like to use that term. Some of them mild, some of them fine, some of them, like I said, you know, no, no, no.
Yeah, one time I hasn't been too often. So one of my greatest fears has been, I mean, we're settled in our home now. We are very fortunate to be settled. But before my biggest fear was accidentally buying a haunted house. And so I do a
Mm,
little research and go check it out. I never did bring my dog, but I would always say like, "Oh, maybe I need to bring the dog to like see if she like senses anything."
mm,
Um, but yeah, so far, no haunted houses have been lived in, but we did stay in, a rental, and this is, like, maybe 5 years ago in New Hampshire, where it was not good. It was bad
mm,
energy. It was most definitely haunted. Um, I don't know what the deal was with that property, but I kept saying, like, "Do I put in the review? Do I give them 1 star and say this place is probably haunted? Do I warn other people? Because like, I mean, I wouldn't have rented
mm.
this if I had known that. Like, do I say anything?" So I didn't say anything because I figured, like, that would be kinda weird. But I do travel now with, if I'm staying somewhere that I haven't previously been, I do travel with some, like, energy clearing spray
Mm,
and
mm.
that kinda thing, 'cause you don't know. People don't advertise that kinda thing. Unless it's the Lizzie Borden house, where that's the big
Where that's the
claim to
draw.
fame here in New
Yeah, where that's
England.
the draw. But, I think you did the right thing. But if someone that you knew personally asked you about the place, I'm sure you would have said, you know, maybe you want to choose another location.
Right. I mean, that would be a great selling point for rentals, like, totally 100% not haunted. I would feel better, booking vacations.
100% verified, not haunted property.
Um, so just one last question before we wrap up is I really enjoyed your short story in the horror anthology The Black Girl Survives This One, which is a YA collection. That's
Yes.
just fantastic. Your short story, Local Color, has such a fantastic twist. I want to read the whole story. I want to know what else happens to the main character. She's fantastic. Um, but this anthology as a whole pushes back on the erasure of Black women and girls in horror, and shows, specifically that, Black girls and women aren't sort of tools for the survival of the white final girl. Um, are there other horror tropes, or more about this specific trope that you would like to see disrupted in writing and movies?
Um, I think there are a lot of tropes that can be done well. Um, I like the whole collection of The Black Girl Survives in this one because so many of us have gone into reading a story or watching a film almost with this a feeling of dread going, oh, please don't let anything happen to this character. And the editors wanted to take away that fear from the reader to go, okay, the black girl survives in this one. You don't know what else might happen during the story, but you at least have that security of knowing. And I think it goes a long way to showing that you can absolutely still have a horror collection knowing that the main character is going to survive. And I think a lot of people go, oh no, well, horror is, are you going to live and die at the end? Well, it isn't always that. It's what do you have to do and what do you have to endure to get through to the end. So that was why I was so excited to write something for that collection, and also, tie in some folklore as well. As far as other horror tropes, I think that some of them can really carry a story. When you look at the, oh, our car's broken down, but there's this old farmhouse in the distance. Maybe they have a phone or a tow truck or whatever. Um, so there are things where you can set the story up to go, this was obviously the only choice that these characters had. Because reading the book or watching the film, we're all, how do you even get to that point? No one would ever let that happen. No one in their right mind would go out, insert thing here. And I think now when people are writing contemporary, one of the things they always have to address is, why don't they just get on their phone and call for help? And it's become this sort of cliche now of, oh no, we don't have any signal, or, my phone's not charged, my phone ran out of charge. So I feel like there's a way to sort of twist that and make things new and make things serve the plot without feeling contrived. I think one of my favorite tropes, because I do love a horror romance, is character looks shockingly like the main evil villain's love interest from 100 years ago or whatever. So it's clearly not the same person, but it triggers something in them where they're like, oh no, my love has returned to me. I must get to them through, nothing will stop us from being together forever. And I love that trope. It's one of those things where I just tell myself, at some point you're going to have to write a horror romance because there's not nearly enough out in the world. So I think that sort of destined to be together, in love with the monster kind of thing, is one of my favorite tropes that I think is underutilized in media in general. And I think there's always something fresh and new and different that you can do with that. And I look forward to reading more of it. And when this gets posted, if some people say and comment, yeah, but what about this book? This book has horror romance. I will be eagerly writing down all the suggestions to add to my to read list later.
I please do write a horror romance. I would read the heck out of that. Most of my friends are romance readers and they talk a lot about it and they recommend books and they sound so good. And I'm like, but is there like a dead body? Is there a go? Is there a slasher? Is there? And there usually
Yeah.
isn't. And I am like, oh, well, I don't know if that's for me then. But a horror romance, I could get in on that and then have, get in on the conversation with my romance reader friends. So please do.
I will, when I do that, I'm going to reach out to you, Danielle, and I'm going to say, I've done it. I've done it.
I love that. Um, and I know it'll be excellent. Um, so we wrap up the show with a segment called The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. Um, Today, I want to ask you, what are your favorite ways to build tension in a story, both as a writer and a reader? And for you, what really makes the spookiness and the dread feel real for you?
Ooh. I think my answer is different whether it's film versus book. If it's film, I think not revealing too much of the bad, evil creature thing, whatever it is, um, not shedding a huge light on it too early, keeping the mystery of what it is or what the intentions are, sort of redirecting it a little bit. As far as building tension in books, I think that one of the things that is super, super important is to focus on the characters response, not always focusing so much on the description of the bad thing or the evil thing or the villain or whatever it is, but how are the other characters responding to it? And seeing that dread from their perspective of, are they biting their nails? Are they hiding under the bed? Are they just denying that it's a thing? Are they faking brave? Whatever the case may be, and just seeing the characters react in a way that feels real, even if it's a variety of reactions, I think makes a reader go, oh my gosh, I can see somebody reacting that way. They must be terrified. They're trying to hide it, obviously, but they're clearly terrified. And I think that seeing that character, especially if it's a character that you've sort of, vibed with early on, seeing them react, you just go, oh my gosh, I'm so invested. And I think one of the things that can also build tension from a writer's point of view, is use more sensory description when throughout the piece, instead of maybe describing this evil is here or this villain is here or he's kicked in the door or whatever the heck is happening. Other sensory descriptions to show there's something wrong, there's something not right. So is it a sound? Is it a smell? Is there some, sort of weird fogginess in the air? What are some other things, sensory things that can possibly show, oh no, it's coming, it's happening, what is it, before it actually gets there? There's, to increase that terror and that anticipation of, oh my gosh, almost, it's getting closer, it's creeping. What's going to happen when it's finally here? So I think that's from a reader and a writer perspective, also with a little bit of visual media in there.
Thank you. Before I do our outro, do you have anything coming up that you would like to promote? If you want to talk a little bit about your newest novel, promote that, where to follow you online. Anything else coming up that you would like to have shared?
As far as promotion, my latest novella, which is called Psychopomp and Circumstance, which is a Southern Gothic fantasy, is up for an Ignite Award, and that is a public vote award. So I'm honored and thrilled to be nominated for novella in that category. And if you have a mind to check that out and see what the Ignites are all about, celebrating diversity in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror from a writer and a critic point of view, check that out. They do an excellent job. As far as where to find me, I have my website, which is edenroyce.com. I do my best to keep that updated as I can with new releases, with appearances when I leave my house, and events that I'm a part of. I'm also on Blue Sky at Eden Royce, I think, .bluesky.social. I'm also on Threads and Instagram at Eden Royce Books. And I think as far as any new releases, I'm working on a book right now. I don't know when that's going to be released, but I'm working on my first full-length adult horror novel right now. So hopefully at some point I'll get finished with that and I'll be able to announce that book is coming out soon. So fingers crossed.
Thank you, Eden, for joining me and for being a Kids Reading Across Rhode Island author. We're so excited to have you be a part of this program here throughout the state. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you would like to talk about what tension feels like for you in a story or other media, or just reach out to the show, you can send an email at overdoingitpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at overdoingitpod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and is brought to you by the library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine.